Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Aftershow. My name is Mark Ellis, and today we're talking about the Mandalorian Season 3. We're going to hit the finale hard. We're going to talk about the whole season and what it means for the future of Star Wars. A lot of deep dives, a lot of burning questions going to get answered. In that vein, there's going to be spoilers. So if you've not yet seen all of the Mandalorian Season 3, please maybe hit pause on this. Maybe bookmark it for later.
This is the way.
And our very special guest today, he literally wrote the book on Star Wars, or at least a book on Star Wars. Why We Love Star Wars author Ken Napzok. You can grab that book wherever you enjoy books and book buying currently. He also is the host of Force Center podcast alongside Joseph Scrimshaw. Ken, you do a lot of Star Wars talking, and Force Center is such a great hub for you to talk about this galaxy far, far away that we love. And now we get to talk about Mandalorian Season 3.
We do. Thank you for the plug up top. Wherever you enjoy books, including swap meets, garage sales, is probably where you'll find mine on discount.
I actually took Why We Love Star Wars to a couple of those like buy a book or like take a book, leave a book for free. Yeah. One of those neighborhood places up in Seattle.
Oh, beautiful.
I'm getting a start in the Pacific Northwest for you.
Nice to know that the trash man has a new book for his collection.
That's pretty much like us visiting another planet. It's a lot easier to do that intergalactic travel in Star Wars, and we see a lot of it in Mandalorian Season 3. So before I get your thoughts on the overall season, I kind of want to get into this backwards and talk about that finale episode that I just caught last night. Yeah. I watched it twice, not because I had to do the show today, but because I was riveted by the battle, by the themes, by the good versus evil, but also what it meant for these people who were formerly on Mandalore, displaced all over the galaxy, many different factions, and now they're finally back, it appears, to have some level of peace for the moment at their homestead.
Yeah, it was, I think, a satisfying conclusion to this season, which was asking this question of not just can Mandalore come back, but how, and what needs to happen for that to take place, and how that comes together, and had some fun pew 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 action, which is what we need. And even shot in a way, including some of the wipes like Return of the Jedi's Battle of Endor. Like, it took a lot of those things home.
Yeah, and as we gave the spoiler alert up top, the whole season is 87% fresh. So we'll talk more about that. The entire run of the show thus far is 91% fresh. So audiences had been on board with Mandalorian from the start. As far as a wrap-up of the season, do you feel like what we saw in the season was highlighted in the finale? Do you think that it was a fitting culmination, I guess, of everything that we've witnessed up to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I really think this was actually one of the most focused seasons. And if you go out there in the discourse space, you might not hear that. It definitely went different places. The plot had its own pacing. It did its own thing. Favreau, along with the writers that, Filoni and Femia, the people that he works with, but Favreau has a certain way of painting. Go back to Swingers. This is a slice of life guy. Like he's going to write little scenes here, and they're going to come together. And I think that sometimes gets forgotten. And I think there was a driving theme in this season, like I just said, that all came together here into this exciting, dare I say, pulse-pounding episode that had some of the biggest action and again, satisfying for me.
Well, it was sort of like, you build this nice house, okay? The Mandalorians have built this fantastic place on this idyllic-looking planet, but then stuff happens. We have evenings like the Night of 1,000 Tears, and for one reason or another, for maybe many reasons, not only do they get displaced from their home, they get driven off into these different factions of either religious beliefs or how strictly do we adhere to the code. You have that lurking in the background, but the action up front and center at the season finale is Moff Gideon trying to build this clone army of him in the homeworld of Mandalore, where the Mandalorians are trying to replant their flag. So it's all coming to a head. And you mentioned all the pew 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 action. It's a lot of pew, pew, pew. It's also a little bit of now Din Grogu kind of matriculating with his ways in the Force.
Oh, man, that's been one of my favorite things. The yes, yes, no, no of it all has just been one of my favorite bits. And I know that's going to be a little different going forward. We had a short-lived IG-12 existence, but I was there. Yeah, no, the action told a story. The final episode was about the idea of together versus alone. Moff Gideon represents the sense of self to the point where his quest for power just means I I just want to work with clones of me. He's like a stand-up comic, quite frankly, who's like, I'm just on the road with myself. This is good. Versus the idea of together. Mandalore fell time and time again because it was shattered. That was been dealt with many, many times. And so I love that was at play. The action told that story. I love the stuff with the Darksaber. It's the broken cycle of violence with the Darksaber, where that was actually used as something to unite, but really was mostly used to divide. It's a false sense of power for the Mandalorian people that they now can move on from. And that's what Mandalore needed to come back and be part of this galaxy.
And it was really exciting to watch just the odds, I guess, that our heroes, our rogue band of heroes was up against, because not only do you have Moff Gideon in this suit that would rival anything that we've seen in Star Wars as far as just protection goes, but you also have these Beskar alloy stormtroopers that are not necessarily going down easy.
No, unless you got a flying hammer from the armor. Love that. Emily Swallow's great as the armor. There's a lot of questions about the armor character that I love asking, but man, at the end of the day, just wang, wang, wang. That was a lot of fun there too.
And it did look like, I mean, again, like I'm a huge sports fan, as are you, and so it looked like you have a lot of iconoclastic personalities coming together. This might have been like the 78 Yankees, where you have a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, but they're all Yankees. So you have all these folks who have different beliefs within the Mandalorian code, but they have to come together because I may not agree with you, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And we saw a lot of that through this final episode as well.
Yeah, it brought home, we're not talking about the overall season yet, but there's some stuff that was put out there about pluralistic societies and how you best can come together to make this happen. This is what needed to happen. This idea of Bo-Katan was by prophecy a chosen one to bring peace, but it was beyond that, right? And her statement of Mandalorians are stronger together, it wasn't Mandalorians and apes are stronger together, what we've learned, but it's important. It's how they needed to come back, because they're different. Mandalore is different going forward. They've been a violent culture. Her sister was murdered in front of her by someone that she helped put in power, Maul, all that kind of stuff from the Clone Wars. And so it was playing with change is big in Star Wars, but this season was about trauma recovery on a larger scale than just the individual. And I think that's one of the things that was brought home in this finale.
And unlike my and your lifestyle of stand-up comedy on the road, where you are very isolationist, you needed to have somebody's back here, and to watch the way that Din and Bo had each other's back. And it was really kind of solidified for me in this final episode, where Bo-Katan puts it all out there in front of everyone. She's like, look, I'm one of the reasons why Moff Gideon is here and is able to do this, because I surrendered. I thought it was the right play to do at that time. I felt it was the only card I had left. And the fact that Din is talking with Bo, and they have that intimate conversation about, like, I have your back, and then we see that happen in that final action sequence, when if she doesn't have his back, he's a goner. He doesn't have her back, he's a goner. If Din Grogu doesn't have either one of theirs back, they're both goners. So to watch all of that action play out, it wasn't just about how cool the battle looked. It was really what these characters mean to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. That true, again, together versus alone. It's almost stand-up comedy versus improv is what we got here. Now,
those worlds, you're literally talking about different sects of Mandalorian there, where we all want to entertain audiences. We have very different codes as to how to do it. As long as we're getting laughs at the end of the day, we're happy.
Now I'm imagining all the Mandalore standing there in primary color T-shirts asking for an occupation or a location. And you and I normally would side with Gideon here. I've done both, but you and I are Gideons, but not in this sense of the word. Yeah, no, it was powerful. You're absolutely right. Bo-Katan would have been defeated. Din Djarin would have been defeated. Grogu, now Din Grogu, would have been defeated. Axe-Woves needed to be there for that. The survivors, the Survivor tribe needed to be there.
Pa's going out like a champ.
Pa's going out. That's how you book a pro wrestling match. You got a big guy. You have a run-in by 3 villains to tell the story there. So it's about sacrifice too, and all that kind of deeper things. Of course.
Okay, so we do see a really cool battle on this barge as we're going to, because Mandalorians, they're going to Mandalore sometimes. Yeah. And so they're playing that chess game, and there's different rules, and I loved that sequence because it did show the competitive nature. It showed that we're not necessarily friends, and we may not be long-term allies, but we're allies for this particular mission. However, we're competing at anything. It's going to come to blows if I disagree with you. And to watch that play out as a microcosm of how these different factions believe their core beliefs and everybody else is secondary, I loved watching that. And it was also, it kind of made me ask the question, like, who is the best of the best when when it comes down to, if you throw all these Mandalorians in a pit, who does come out on top? I have a feeling the result would be different every time.
It could be different every time, which is part of the problem. It's a zero-sum game that we keep playing here, and that the Mandalorians have been playing. They put this power in this mythical, magical sword, which is not a bad thing. Tar Vizsla creates it. It's a symbol of the community, but it's something, a yoke they've been living under for a long time. That's why I was happy to see it break, and that it's no longer about the might. It's about coming to not even victory, moving forward together. But yeah, that was, I love that scene in chapter 7, chapter 23 overall, of them playing Mandalorian space chess and fighting, because who hasn't? I always say I grew up with different rules for Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
My dad taught me that there was also match, and when I would go to the playgrounds and be like, match, kids would be like, the hell is this? Kenny's gone crazy.
Fighting words.
That's fight.
I can't even get people to agree on whether you go 1, 2, 3 and then you throw, or if you throw 1, on 2, 3
and then match. So.
The match bringing in.
Yeah, it was fun to see that stuff. And Grogu being sort of a balance there. No.
Are you still enjoying, I mean, I guess, do you feel the same way at the end of this season about Grogu as you did? I guess, has his timeline been honored, do you think, as far as his sort of learning the ways of the Force, getting his feet wet in that world, but also sort of being like, I understand the Force and all that stuff, and I have some powers, but also, this is my daddy. And I got the scene where he actually officially gets adopted by Din and becomes Din Grogu. Whew, I don't want to be a father, Ken, but I love me, my little doggy Molly. Kind of reminded me of our relationship.
It did, especially Grogu eating all the snacks, as Molly does too. No, I love that. It was an emotional scene, and it depends on how you read it. I kind of read it as the armorer kind of knows that's the end result, and she's kind of playing the rule game and kind of, I don't know, his parents are gone, and then when she says this. Pause is the way. I thought that was pretty uniquely powerful.
She reminds me a little, in an odd way, of Drax the Destroyer from Guardians of the Galaxy, because she's not as comedic as Drax's character is, but they have this way of speaking where it's very quick, it's down to the point, it's bare bones, it's just matter of fact, there's not an ounce of sarcasm, but it drives the action. And it's kind of like, okay, we can all talk in code and use looks, and she's got a mask on. It's just, I'm going to say the words, and you're going to follow my goddamn instructions.
Yeah, Emily Swallow did such a great job with this role. She's an intriguing character. She's not perfect, and I don't want characters to be perfect. She's got some questions to answer.
Armor's got a past.
She's got a past, and she's got some questions to answer on how she kind of raised what essentially was called a cult. They didn't identify themselves as a cult, to be fair, but other people kind of did. And keeping a lot of the truth of the galaxy from people like Din. Remember, at one point, Din was like, "What are Jedi? Jedi? I've heard about these songs of eons past. Thinking about these warriors." So that's a way they did it, and that's the way they survived. And what I loved about the armorer's character in this season, but particularly in the finale, is she changed and confirmed the changes in her heart. And I think Favreau writes in a very direct and honest way. It's not for everyone. Like I said, go back to the very beginning. Doug Liman directs it, but he writes Swingers, and it's piece by piece. It's scene by scene. It's slice of life by slice of life, and it's pretty sincere and it's pretty direct. And the armorer was this character that I didn't trust at one point. And at one point she goes, you know what? I've heard and seen all the evidence. We keep getting destroyed by dinosaurs. I've decided to change. And that change is going to be real and deep in me, and I'm going to show it in my actions. Give me a hammer. I'm going to hit some Stormtrooper head. And that's what I absolutely loved about her in the end.
It's such a great jumping off point for us to now talk about the full season, too, because, again, 87% fresh. The audience score, 51% rotten with the verified audience score. So it feels like audiences have different interpretations of this season. I'm not sure if they felt it was just more of the same, if it didn't connect enough to the larger Star Wars galaxy. It's hard to get in the minds of either critics or fans when it comes to this. But for you, a Star Wars expert on Force Center, you guys talk about this every week. When the season began, and really this speaks to your point about the armor, is that we're introduced to these folks as far back as season 1. And because the show is called The Mandalorian and we're following this one character, Din, and he meets the armor and they have their helmets on, we as audiences are kind of trained to like, oh, that's the way. And they say this is the way over and over again. So anybody else who is not adhering to this particular way, we're going to look at it as like, wait, you're an outcast because you're not the lead of the show. You're doing it wrong because the leads are doing it right. But this season opens up with this very ritualistic ceremony for this initiation to become that faction of Mandalorian. And then, as you said, gets interrupted by a giant turtle. And now all of a sudden it has to be somebody like Din, who's had his ups and downs adhering to that code, saving the day. And you think maybe that action in the first episode of this season is what even turned the armor onto. Maybe there's a different, looser way to go about things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the question of trying to get into the minds of audiences and critics, it's impossible. And everyone's going to have their own thoughts and opinions, and more importantly, their own interpretations. I'll never take away anyone's opinions or interpretations of the art. I'm here to talk about the art of this show. This is a piece of art that was saying something. One of the things I think it was saying from the beginning was, we are going to retake Mandalore, but we have to analyze how. And this question of what is the way, we keep saying it. It's a good catchphrase to put on your Kia as you're driving down the road. This is the way, honk, honk. But analyzing it. And one of the most important moments in the show this year is you have this ceremony, this Ragnar of Vizsla, or Paz Ragnar. We don't know how their naming convention goes now, but he's adopted into House Vizsla. The ceremony is interrupted. It's interrupted by what I keep calling it, Dragon Attack River front. Yeah, what a great, let's move here. Let's move to, it's called, Zillow said it's Dinosaur Attack River. That's great.
Yeah, the property is awful low here for something as beautiful. Oh, because they have dinosaur turtles.
So that interrupts it. But then later on, we come back to that moment where he loses the dart contest to Grogu. Just a wonderful, cute moment. But that's what I'm talking about. The inherent, it's important to train. It's important to, just because you're a pacifist doesn't mean you're not going to defend yourself or defend others. But this is kind of the Mandalorian culture. It's win or lose, right? That's how we look at society, unfortunately, too many times. And Star Wars moves past that a lot. It shouldn't be about win or lose. Ragnar loses to Grogu, and we're all celebrating. He mopes and goes to the river and is taken away by this pterodactyl monster, and they go chasing him, and this is their way. This is the covert's way. And they run out of the jet fuel pack. They all land, and Paz Vizsla says this line that I think is also kind of unintentionally funny, but it's really tragic. He looks off as his adoptive son is being taken to his death, and he goes, it always gets away with our kids. And that's the moment that Bo-Katan goes
This has happened
across.
Before.
I don't know why do we live in Dinosaur Attack River? And Bo-Katan goes flying off. And that's one of the moments when the armorer kind of has this revelation of, my way is getting us destroyed. We can't keep surviving here. We must find a new way forward. And for Mandalore to be retaken and rebuilt, it has to be done differently. This is why I also think Chapter 6 of this year, Chapter 22 overall, the Jack Black episode is actually a pretty important episode, because it's talking about, if you want to go to this direction to rebuild Mandalore, look at how this is happening. This is a world-building episode that took time with different cultures and how they interact and how you communicate with them and how you bring your own baggage to different conversations with people, and a season that's about how do you recover from trauma, both on an individual level and a cultural, societal level. How do you rebuild? It's not just simply reaching across the aisle with people that vote differently, but understanding everyone's needs. And I think in that moment, as little Ragnar's being taken off, Wesley Kimmel,
Wesley Kimmel,
and Jimmy's like, I can't do anything. I think his nephew, I can't do anything.
Jimmy's writing jokes about it. He's got a show to do.
He's going off. It's in one of those moments where our own way, we have our beliefs. We need our beliefs. They keep our beliefs keep us strong. They keep us, they help us survive, but it's not going to get us over the finish line, so to speak. And again, I don't mean to talk about it in wins and losses, but it's not going to move us forward. Star Wars is about moving forward. It's about the old and the new coming together. That's been in place since A New Hope. The old generation's got to help the newer generation. It's got to be their fight, but you got to take from the past as you move forward and combine it all. This season was about that time and time again. Every episode built to what we see, how Mandalore can return, not just going to pew, pew, pew and winning.
Right, and as the season opens, I mean, I'm thinking, okay, our quest this season is to take back our home planet. Now, in order to do that, we got to make sure the home planet is inhabitable in the first place, because there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of rumors on the interwebs going around about Mandalore and whether you can even set foot on there. I have no idea. Can you take your helmet off? Is your face going to explode? And so when we actually go there and we see the living waters and to see Din, I mean, this is a full circle moment for Din. I know you just got back from Europe and you probably had some experiences where you're looking at Big Ben or something and you never thought, oh my God, I'm finally here. It's probably the same thing for Din, being in those waters and finally getting to, he has a bigger life than he thought he would have with raising the child. Yeah. But having that sort of, it's you know, I don't want to belittle and say it's just this boyhood fantasy of starting for the Yankees, but it's that moment where his life has come full circle, and he is actually doing the thing that he feels his life's quest has been, and now he gets to be restored in the eyes of the most stringent faction of Mandalorians.
Ooh, yeah, no, that's all great. And by the way, over there, when I held that ham and cheese crepe in my hands, and when all my life...
That's what you wanted when you got to Paris?
In Paris, I was like, all my life is built to this moment there. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I loved about this season, is it moved beyond what had been presented the first two seasons in terms of just format, where I think a lot of people, you could have thought, hey, the return to Mandalore is going to be key. We kind of even saw that in the trailer, but it's this idea of Din's got to get his juice back, his mojo back, and that happened right away early. And Din spent an entire season changed, and again confirmed in his changes, his action. He was a steadfast character who drove a lot of it. Bo-Katan doesn't get off the throne unless he's there. Grogu doesn't move forward unless he's there. There's a lot of things that Din was the reason for, because he was now a steadfast character in who he is and who he wants to be. So I think that was one of the key things as well. Now I'm thinking about the ham and cheese crepe, so I've lost my thought.
Okay, so it's just bigger, or is it just more natural? What's the difference between a ham and cheese crepe there? You know what?
I don't know.
We'll get into that on another episode of Aftershow. But for now, we're talking Mandalorian Season 3 with Force Center host Ken Napzok. The critics' consensus, according to Rotten Tomatoes, which again, 87% fresh on the tomato meter this season, is, as I say it like Yoda, the critics' consensus is mileage may vary by a couple parsecs as The Mandalorian becomes more and more about the connective tissue of broader Star Wars lore, but this remains one of the most engaging adventures in a galaxy far, far away. So I want to ask you about that next, because we do have this quest not just to retake Mandalore, which is just sort of, a piece of paper or a piece of property or a planet, but it's also about Mandalorians and not just getting back what they lost, but trying to figure out why'd they lose it in the first place? Well, what did they do wrong? It's sort of them watching game film of their own emotions, personalities, and quirks, and saying, how can we restructure that to have a safer society for us and our people going forward? But then you do have this broader Star Wars lore that's factoring in, where you have the First Order, maybe the skeleton, the foundation of the First Order, starting to come to fruition a little bit. We see some spots that are post-Return of the Jedi thriving. It looks like Navarro is going to be a very nice place to visit. Coruscant doing its Vegas, New York hybrid thing. But then you have other parts that are really kind of struggling in the galaxy. And so as far as the broader picture of Star Wars lore, what did you really take from this season?
First of all, I love that you're comparing the Mandalorians to the Cleveland Browns watching the drive footage over and over again. How did this happen? How did Ernest Biner fumble?
Oh, he was our best Mandalorian, too.
We're making 1986 sports references here. This is wonderful. No, so here's what I think this season, why it might rub against some folks as well. Again, mileage may vary is a wonderful way to look at it. Season 1, definitely, and a lot of Season 2, was Lone Wolf and Cub. It was Mandalorian, Din Djarin on the road by himself, connects with Grogu, builds that connection, and then he starts to become more aware of the galaxy at large. The show is more aware of the galaxy at large. Now, I think sometimes I get what you're meaning by connective tissue. I think it's a little danger in YouTube punditry talking land to say that the show intended to connect to the larger Star Wars lore. I think it's just setting its flag in the era of what's going on 5 to 6 years after, which is why that third chapter this season with Dr. Penn Pershing and Elia Kane there on Coruscant, which was a little bit of a different episode, without a doubt. But again, this is a season that's about trauma recovery, and you have the amnesty program. The New Republic is going forward, but it's making some mistakes, and we're all trying to figure out the best way to recover from this giant thing that happened to us. Again, I don't know if there's anything in society, our world, the last few years that has happened to us on a large level.
What did we all go through recently?
That maybe Favreau's wanting to analyze how we recover, and also it's repeating of other things in history. You have the Galactic Civil War, and how do we all move forward from that? And everyone's kind of plugging into the bigger picture. Now, as far as the First Order connections, we got Brendel Hux, we got the mention of the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn, Captain Paleon from the Heir of the Empire the trilogy, though Paleon was heard in Star Wars Rebels, so he's been brought into canon before. It's all wonderful stuff that's connecting to the larger picture, but this show was still about Moff Gideon being the big bad and his relationship to Mandalorians and his trying to take from them and take from the culture and take, like the Empire at large, take from everyone else to make themselves stronger. It's this inflated sense of self that he's represented. But I think the show is not just pushing into the lore, it is becoming aware of the world. That is what Din's journey is. I'm by myself. I just do a job. I'll take you in warm. I'll take you in cold. There's a larger world that I'm suddenly becoming aware of. I now have a connection to this kid, Grogu. That's pushing me forward. I now have a connection to who I am as a Mandalorian. What does that mean to me? Now that I'm pretty sure about that, now I got to get our world connected to the society again. What does that mean to me? And that's how the show is pushing into the larger galaxy.
I mean, we always looked at Mandalorians. We were all introduced to at least the concept and the armor the same way through Empire Strikes Back, unless you saw the holiday special when it aired and you met this Boba Fett character and you see, oh, that armor's cool. I want to know more about this guy. And I think from that, we looked at a show like The Mandalorian and we just assumed this is going to be that lone wolf who just goes sort of western town to town, gunslinging, dueling with anybody who will take the fight. But now realizing that there is sort of a code and there is a people and that you have to look after. And it's really telling how specific they are when Grief offers them, basically he's like, hey, y'all can chill in Navarro. You got all your lands there. And they're like, we appreciate it. We're going to summer here. We still need to go back to Mandalore. Problem with that is that that's where Gideon has decided, I want to build my clones. I want to start an army here. And so from Moff Gideon's perspective, let's get into that a little bit as far as his mindset goes, because Giancarlo Esposito, fantastic actor, I think with more range than people give him credit for. Having said that, he's very much like Gustavo Fring from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul in this show, where he's so cold and calculating. He's a little more animated as Gideon, but he's still great at taking a lot of different sects of evil and uniting them in his cause, as we see in that season finale episode where we're all talking to holograms and everybody's got their points, and he's like, I'm kind of still I'm the leader here. Yeah, no, I love what he's done, and he's played as a very vaudevillian type. That's I think the style of art that Favreau paints in. It's this classic Star Wars serial adventure kind of approach, not just in the action, but even the dialogue with complete sentences and, before they drew their first breath and all that kind of stuff. And I think that sometimes that is Star Wars. Tony Gilroy took it in a different direction. That's his version of that time. And I think a lot of people rubbed up against it post Andor, which I understand. But this is kind of the DNA of Star Wars, and Giancarlo Esposito is so good in this role in these two episodes because again, I keep saying about he's this sense of self, but it's one of the lessons of Star Wars is who you are is enough. That's why I think, and people will maybe have some issues with this, Jar Jar Binks is one of the most important characters in Star Wars because who he is matters. Everyone has value, and then you have your place in the story. Ewoks for you, Return of the Jedi fan. That's what they are. We don't win without them. One of the most important moments in Star Wars is Princess Leia looking at Wicket and going, this is an ally, not an enemy. Let me try to work with you. That helps topple the Empire. Giancarlo Esposito, as Moff Gideon, represents the opposite of that, where there's nothing about him that is enough. So he wants to take more. And the one thing I've never had is the Force. And of course, he's not making clones of Snoke. That was never in play. It's him and his relationship. That stuff's going on. Yes, we might get some answers about what's going on in Exegol. We might get some answers. It's possible you might get a young Snoke with hair and Andy Serkis gets to play that role again. That might happen. But this was about Moff Gideon and what he felt he lacked. He knows he's not enough. So he needs to make himself, clone himself, and give himself the Force. And it's about that, where on the opposite end of it, you have Din learning about who he is. You have Grogu learning about who he is. You have Bo-Katan realizing that she doesn't need this saber. She is enough. She earns that saber. A lot of people think it's a clerical error that she just was handed the sword. She wasn't handed the sword by Din Djarin in the end of chapter 6 or chapter 22 overall. She earned it because of who she is. She saved Din back in chapter 3 or whatever it was with that creepy little robot, spider robot. Yeah, that thing went haywire fast. And that's how she earned it. Who she was got her the Darksaber, and she doesn't need that. She's above that. Like Din Djarin says, I don't care about station. I don't care about that sword. He's like John Cena, hustle, loyalty, respect. You can't see me. I'm Din. I'm here. And that's the lesson, and that's the opposite of what Moff Gideon is every time. That's the dark side. The light side builds, the dark side destroys, and the dark side takes. And that's what I loved about this finale was all those clones were him, because of course, all I want to spend time with is myself, because myself is the only thing that's going to get me through this. And I'm trying to overcompensate for what I lack in my own sense of self by taking power over you. Now I'm thinking of that final shot that we got in this season where we can finally put our feet up. We got this nice little cabin right on the edge of town. You're watching the kid play in the yard. He puts his feet up. And now with the John Cena comparison, I just want to see Din Djarin still keep the helmet on, but have the jean shorts, like kind of relaxed. When he puts his feet up at the end, it's like the job has finally been accomplished. And I felt like this season ended the same way that a lot of those old comic book serials would, even before our time, where it's the world is safe, but for how long? He knows that. He knows that there's going to be other issues, and we're going to have to come together as a team. And he reminded me of somebody like a Michael Jordan having that victory cigar, where you have your game face on, and Jordan's teammates would even say, we never knew that guy had emotion. We never knew he had feeling until you saw him win a chip, and then he finally lets it all out. That is the Mandalorian version of finally, in a weird way, reminded me of Thanos at the beginning, at the end of Infinity War, beginning of Endgame, where he did a really bad thing. He snapped his fingers and he killed a lot of people on a lot of planets. But for him, he was finally at peace. And there's some sort of, happiness and kinship, I feel, with that.
Din Djarin looked like a guy who just taped his first HBO comedy special and he's going out to a cabin in Big Bear just to relax. I love that. Because I think you're right to say in season 4, Favreau said season 4 is written, and looks like we're going to Carson Teva and Carson's Heroes, where they're going to be working and dealing with the Imperial remnants. Carson Teva has been one of my favorite characters because he's the first to look around and go, something's going on here. So I'm excited to see that. But Din needed to get to this point. Din Grogu needed to get to this point where they are changed. They went through that journey. They walked this journey to get to the point where now they can help and look at the larger place of the galaxy. That's Mandalore as well. The Mandalorian people, I bet, we'll see how much they get involved with everything, but they are changed as well. If you know the history of Mandalore as it's played with in both legends and canon, but mostly canon, it is a warrior society that just keeps destroying themselves. I keep talking about that zero-sum game. Duchess Satine, Bo-Katan's sister, tried to change that. She was essentially murdered for it, and now they are different going forward. So now, once you kind of know yourself, you can then go help others if you want to look at it that way. So I love what you talk about. It is this piece, but the journey's not done. It's a new chapter of Din's life.
Which characters do you trust the most after we're going to put Mando and Mando Grogu to the side. Din and Din Grogu are on the side because we're going to implicitly trust them. We've gotten to know them over 3 years. We know their motives, and that's highlighted by maneuvers like when Din is defending Bo to her former faction and is like, hey, she's the reason why she earned the dark sword. She earned this thing, and they're like, okay, fine. Who else do you trust? Because at the beginning of the season, our old friend from Schmoes Know, Katie Sackhoff, I wasn't sure if we can trust Bo-Katan or her motives, but it seems like I'd put a lot of stock in her going forward.
Yes, you absolutely should. She begins this season with, once again has lost the Darksaber and feels that that's what she needs. Again, this idea that who I am is not enough, and she learns that who I am is enough as she goes through that journey. And it's not about being a leader with a symbol of power. It's being a leader by understanding everyone around you and understanding everyone's needs, and how you can all move forward together. I trust her. I'll tell you who I trust now more than ever, because I didn't, was Axe Woves.
He came to play.
Yeah, because the title of Chapter 7 was The Spies, and that threw a lot of people off. Though Favreau has not actually confirmed this and said this, we want to be clear, this is speculation. But The Spies is a reference to the books of Numbers, the book of Numbers in the Bible, and the 12 Israelite chieftains who go into Canaan to spy on the land that their homeworld they're about to retake.
Get a little survey of what's going on.
So, but everyone ended that episode going, who's the spy? Fair question because of the title of the episode, if you're not overly familiar with the story of the people of Israel. In the Bible. I think Favreau might be. So I didn't trust Axe Woves, but Axe Woves is a real one. And he stuck with it. He stuck with the plan. And I like that he survived. I also like, you're a fan of Return of the Jedi.
It's the best Star Wars movie ever made to this point.
I like that this season ended. Go with me here, folks. Happy.
We won.
We won. Rest in peace, Paz Vizsla. Tate Fletcher was great in the role.
Build a statue to that guy.
Build a statue. But everyone's happy. Everyone kind of got not what they wanted. They got what they deserved. Their needs were met, including Navarro, including High Magistrate Carl Weathers just wants to put a stew on, and Grief Karga gets the town marshal that he wants. He wants to rebuild this city, and I love.
Zellen's got a bump in pay, right?
Got a bump up in pay.
Babu Frick and company.
There's something to me that the story's not done, but I don't know. With the state of the world, I like a win every now and then. I like a win.
So I have a couple maybe kind of dumb questions that you can answer because you're one of these Star Wars experts, as we hear on Force Center week after week, your podcast with Joseph Scrimshaw. The different helmets or the lack of helmets, that's sort of the illumination of relaxing of the rules a little bit. Is that how you read that, where Bo-Katan is now allowed to take her helmet off in the eyes of this very stringent armor who says you're the one to unite everybody, so I'll let you take the helmet off. But then it seems like we're just going to be more accepting of everybody being able to call themselves Mandalorian, even if they're not adhering to the strictest dress code.
I think it was a great result of what was actually in play behind the scenes of Jon Favreau had this idea. I'm convinced originally he might have thought it was a Boba Fett series, and they were like, we can't do that quite yet. And he was like, all right, pause on that. But I create this character, the Mandalorian, and he's like, and they never take their helmet off. And then someone like Dave Filoni comes along and says, well, that's not true. In the Clone Wars, we established that they can. And then so out of that, and at Star Wars, I was just out in London for Star Wars Celebration. There was a great point when Favreau gave Filoni a lot of credit, and a lot of people give the man in the cowboy hat credit, and credit where it was due. But they were like, Dave is kind of considered this lore expert. He never says no to any idea. So if you come in with an idea, my idea of the Mandos never take their helmets off, Dave goes, yes, and they also can. So how do we marry that together? Where the Clone Wars is you have Prime Minister Almec saying Jango Fett's no Mandalorian. Well, now we have this idea of even Boba Fett going, no, here's my chain code. He was a foundling. We believe it's who you kind of identify as. Like, I'm Mandalorian because I walk the way. It's not about blood. It's about the actions. And so then you have Axe Woves in that game going, these primitives make up their own rules. And now he comes around and so born out of this conflicting concept over Star Wars lore behind the scenes, you get this wonderful lesson of how we all can maybe come together. Grab hands on a hill and give the world a Coke, because we got some kumbaya peace here in Mandalore now, and I think it was beautiful.
So George Lucas has been quoted as saying that he made Star Wars for 12-year-olds. I'm going to take it even further back than that. And Filoni, if we're all 5-year-olds and we're all playing in the giant sandbox, Filoni's the guy you want in the middle, because he's going to say, okay, you're G.I. Joe and you're Barbie and your Transformers and your Mask can all come together. We can all have this world and we'll build some sort of canon that adheres to everybody's rules. So it seems like, as was first announced at Star Wars Celebration when you were in the audience for, that Filoni is going to be directing this movie that eventually will be the culmination of the stories told in the Book of Boba Fett and then The Mandalorian and in the Ahsoka show, which is coming up later this summer. We get Skeleton Crew later on this year. So it seems like we have the right guy in charge of that particular film, trying to summarize everything that we've seen in these streaming shows.
Yeah, and it's pretty ambitious, and I think it's clear there's a lot of stuff going out there that this is a, quote, Avengers type team up movie to kind of bring together all these shows. Kathleen Kennedy has directly said, I would not call it that. Dave Filoni has said season 3 of Mando does not directly lead into Ahsoka, but it is in this time period and it's dealing with the big picture, and Thrawn's going to be behind that. So I'm excited to see where he takes it. And I know we may talk about our favorite episodes this season, but the second episode of this season is one of the things it puts out there is this idea. You're talking about Filoni being 5 in the sandbox, which, by the way, I did that too. There was one day I tried to get my friends to play MASH. And I was like, you're Klinger, you're Radar O'Reilly. That did not go over well. No one had seen it.
I was not a Filoni either. If I caught the Barbies in the bathtub with the G.I. Joe, I knew my sister just taking a bath, and she made the G.I. Joe make out with Barbie, and that was not cool with me.
No, you just mentioned it. Matt Stryker of MASH does not play in G.I. Joe Land, though eventually they had released a figure at the Joes. Anyways, George Lucas says Star Wars is for 12-year-olds, and what that means is you are a young adult about to be faced with choices, and I'm going to give you a morality tale on how to navigate those choices. It's not infantile. It's actually about you're about to be an adult. The idea of, Filoni's just a guy that plays with his action figures. Yes, but those are the stories that shaped us, especially our generation. Filoni is in our generation. He's a Pittsburgh Penguin fan. We'll overlook that, and a Steeler fan. But this notion of, there seems to be this notion now to look down on, Filoni and Favreau just play with their action figures. Yes, they do. But think about what you did when you were playing with those action figures. You saw something on the screen in a movie. You took those figures home with you. And the morality lessons that you took from that movie, you now then played, maybe, not exact, in the sandbox. Those stories are our stories. Those are our culture. That's how we were formed. And there's depth in it, and there's purpose in it. The second episode of this season was about Bo-Katan going, all those stories mean nothing. They mean nothing. The legend of the Darksaber, the myth of store. They're nothing. They're stories we tell children. They're playing with your action figures. And then she realizes it's more than that. It has purpose. It's a guiding force, and it's imagination. It's how we move forward. It's how we form ourselves. That was the second episode of this season, what it was about in a lot of ways. And so that's why I'm excited to take it back to your question about Filoni. I'm excited to see where he can lead this all, along with Favreau, along with Famille, and along with Bryce Dallas Howard. I hope she gets to direct more things too. And how do we move into this big episode and this big movie to kind of bring it all home?
Yeah, Bo-Katan needs to see the classic trilogy again, because anytime you're in Star Wars and you're in a puddle of anything that is above your knees, something is alive in there and it's trying to kill you. You got to be aware of it. Yeah. I don't care if it's a trash compactor, if it's a swamp on Dagobah, if it's the living water. They call them the living waters for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's because there's a giant dinosaur below the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad you brought up the favorite episode. You're doing a better job of my job than I am.
No.
The second episode of the season really hit it for you. I'm going to give you mine, and then you can counter with your final reason why the second episode is your favorite.
Is this a debate? I want Ruva to ring a bell when we win.
Producer Christian is going to score this one. I loved episode 5 of this season, titled The Pirate, for many different reasons, not the least of which is I'm a Star Wars fan, so I appreciate the themes. I love how the religious aspect of it is not, it's kind of, it's like the Force description. It's this ethereal thing. It's just kind of in the water. It's in the trees. It's around. But it's not so heavy-handed. I also love a good fight scene.
Yeah.
I loved seeing the Mandalorians come defend Navarro from the pirates, where it's Mando. He's like, okay, I know what my purpose is, and maybe to your point, he might not have done this same act in season 1, but he's learned. He's got a kid now. He is defending the people who have helped him. He's defending Grief Karga and his people who are just trying to get away from that old kind of life, you know?
Yeah.
And so now you have this invasion of pirates, and they're hell-bent on revenge, and they're coming in, and we stop them. I love that action sequence, but the other thing I really loved in that episode was towards the end, it reminded me of Jaws, and I don't think it was lost on any of the filmmakers in this particular episode that Teva is just cruising around town. Yeah. He's just driving around, blasting his tunes, got the top and the X-Wing down, and then he sees this that looks imperial, but it's not inhabited, and there's a blast hole in it, and it reminded me of in Jaws when they find Ben Gardner's boat, and I'm waiting for the body of somebody to say, come right there, and we realized that was Gideon's transport, and that he's not going to make it to trial. This guy got out somehow. It was such a cool moment late in that episode that's the one where I was like, I really appreciate the quality, the craftsmanship that goes into making these episodes. That felt cinematic to me, and I think just in terms of feeling like this is on the big screen, season 3 as a whole might have been the best job of doing that up to this point for me.
Yeah, look, even the final battle of chapter 8.
Oh, it was unreal.
Yeah, and I think the stagecraft, the volume has improved. I still, I love the look of Andor a little bit more than some of the stuff in the other shows. I cannot wait for the world at large to see the Acolyte footage that we saw at Celebration. Leslie Headland's got a great show in her hands, I'm convinced, and it looks wonderful. And it was shot a little differently. But the volume, the stagecraft of it all has definitely gotten to this wonderful point where it does feel cinematic. And I do love that scene, because it's that, you're pirates and, Gorian Shards defeated, Vane's run off to go join Skeleton Crew as a cast member. and
I got another gig, guys.
Yeah, I got another gig. I'm doing the Chuckle Hut on Tuesdays, I really love that. I just love Paul Sun-Young Kim as a performer, and him in Star Wars. Such a wonderful Star Wars fan to see him as Carson.
He always does the right thing, but he's also he's like, I know what the right thing to do here is, but I'm going to go have a drink first.
Yeah, and I have some questions. I have some. Exactly. I have some questions about how the New Republic judicial system is like. Hey, Gideon, he didn't show up today. Anyone know where he is? We'll figure it out. There's some of those things.
Watch Batman, all right? You just got to take out the Joker sometimes.
But these shows aren't necessarily about that. I always say Star Wars does not want you to ask how or what first. It wants you to ask why, and there was some great purpose in that there too. And that's a great episode. It's just kind of fun, and that's also the episode that has the amazing flashback, right? Is that the one that has the flashback to Kelleran Beck? I can't remember now. Or is that chapter 4? Ahmed Best's return.
I think that flashback was was episode 4.
Yeah,
we'll let the comment on this episode, by the way, and let us know your thoughts on season 3. What was your favorite episode? Yeah. I'm taking the pirate. We're figuring out which one of Ahmed Best had a triumphant return to Star Wars canon in. Just quickly, what you just said was, it always strikes me when I'm learning Star Wars, sitting at your knee, and you talk about the why is the most important in this galaxy far, far away. What was the why about episode 2 that really got into your bones? Was it just you felt like, okay, now we're locked in, we know where the season is going to go?
Actually, what I loved about it on a surface level was that after that episode, I didn't quite know where the season was going to go because maybe I was mistaken of looking at this. I even saw a joke that someone was like, I guess this season's going to be about Din trying to go take a bath. And it's the same kind of criticism of Fellowship of the Rings and just people walking. Got it? We get it. You're a wonderful barb from an early Kevin Smith movie, but let's move past that. Because by the way, even Kevin Smith moved past that.
Stop playing hockey on the roof and get a job.
Yeah, no, the Mines of Mandalore, it opened up the season for me. Where again, this season was highly focused on what it set out to do. We need to return Mandalore, and how do we do that, and why do we need to do that? And that episode, so I loved to go to Mandalore as a Clone Wars fan was spectacular to go there. But again, the stuff with Bo-Katan, just her going, these stories mean nothing. It was a very meta episode because it's you and I have grown up. We grew up in the 80s where we were told, put aside your childish toys, put aside your childish movies and grow up.
You'll never make any money playing video games.
Yeah, and look, I want maturity and growing up. That's the thing. It isn't about that. I keep saying pop culture is our culture. We were raised on this stuff. This formed who we are. Flight of the Navigator formed you more than some Edgar Allan Poe book.
Compliance.
All right? Okay? And for Bo-Katan to be like, none of this, it was all pomp and circumstance. We put on a show for people. There's nothing down there in the living waters. There's these stories. Let me read you this plaque. It's silly. And for her to learn that that's not necessarily true. Now, in the show, it's because the mythosaurus may be real. Did she see it? Did she not see it? But it was a story for us to go, all this matters. You grow from this, you learn from this, it affects your lives. And that's why The Mines of Mandalore is my favorite one this season.
That's a great mic drop, not just for season 2 or episode 2, but also this entire season 3 as to what we learned, the feelings, the expectations that were subterfuge in a good way for you. And I think for a lot of folks out there, you talked about how this is the way as the Mandalorian kind of catchphrase. It works for a nice bumper sticker.
It does.
You have a great bumper sticker that's 2 words where you always encourage Star Wars fans out there to enjoy thinking about what the future could hold, but speculate responsibly is what's going to be on your tombstone. Here, let's get Napzok. Speculate responsibly. So I'm going to ask you to speculate responsibly a little bit here. Yeah. Season 4, is there anything that you don't want to get too attached to anything? I know you well enough to know that you don't want to start writing your own fan fiction that would somehow undercut what you actually see in Mando Season 4. Is there any character, any storyline, anything that you hope you get to see in that next season?
I do hope that it pushes more into what's actually going on with the New Republic, whether or not we see Mon Mothma and Leia. We're going to see Mon Mothma and Ahsoka, but that was one of my little critiques of this season of Mando. Too many people walked away from it thinking that the show was saying, New Republic, Empire, they're all the same. That kind of thinking gets us into a lot of trouble. Check the intentions. Check the intentions of the New Republic. Not perfect, but I think their goals are better than absolute oppression. So I think I want to find a little bit more of that as they try to, again, the galaxy is recovering, and how do they deal with that? And as far as people names, we're going to have Thrawn's in play. Seeing Brendel Hux was great for a sequel fan, a trilogy fan like myself.
When he says Project Necromancer,
I think
we're talking about the guy, right?
It could either be them trying to just get the vassal for the spirit of Palpatine, and that could lead directly to stuff, and who knows.
But you even notice the way that Moff Gideon refers to that, where that's like Gideon sounds like somebody like in the 60s who's like building his garage full of robots, and some guy's talking about the internet, and he's like, good luck with your little project there. I got these robots ready to go in the garage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very sci-fi. So I want some of those characters. One of my favorite characters out there that has not shown up in anything other than books, comics, and video games, which is a lot because I read those and play those games too, is a character of Grand Admiral Rey Sloane. She was this wonderful character introduced in a couple of novels, and she is one of the ones that kind of leads the remnants out to the final the unknown regions. And she's an interesting character because I call her, in my book, Why We Love Star Wars, that you so thankfully mentioned.
Available wherever you enjoy books.
She's the good villain. She's for the Empire, but you understand her reasons for thinking that law and order and security was needed, but then she discovers that it's not maybe in line with her way of doing it. And she's important, and her end has not been answered yet. So I would love to have her in season 4 of Mandalorian as they try to deal with what's going on.
And there's more and more characters that have made that journey from being born out of books or video games into this Star Wars canon as far as the TV shows and movies go. Thrawn being a prime example where we've seen him in Rebels, but we're all talking about him in this show. Moff Gideon, is he gone for good? Is he like Jason, where he just kind of disappears in a fire and then he's just going to show up again at our doorstep?
Look, Star Wars is it's never be certain about people being gone. He could show up.
Nobody's ever really gone.
No one's ever really gone. And again, it's the why of it. Palpatine returned to show you that the dark side never lets go. It refuses to change. It refuses to let go of its own power. Gideon could be that, but I take it as spiritually dead. Like he's dead, and that was the lesson. It was about him and his relationship to Mandalore and what he wanted, and that is his end. The Darksaber 2, I think, could be gone, but you could rebuild that, but it's a different version of it. It's played differently.
Never put your clones in the hallway on the way to where the final battle's going to be. You can't. Have you not seen Multiplicity? You hide them above the garage in the shed so your wife and your kids have no idea that you're cloning an army up in the...
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm pretty sure there's a Moff Gideon around there going, I like pizza.
there's a Steve Dave Moff Gideon out there. We could talk about Star Wars and particularly this episode and this season of Mandalorian, season 3 all day. We are out of time, but that gives me a great conduit to invite everybody out there. Once again, comment and let us know what you thought about this season. Was it your favorite? Do you love where the show's going? Do you have questions? Ken can usually answer them on his show, Force Center, which you can catch every week. You and Joseph Scrimshaw talking about all things in the Star Wars universe, breaking down what happened and also the why of it. Where else can all the kids out there check you out?
Hey, easiest thing, go to my website, Napzok.com. Occasionally, there's this hack comic that takes me around the country with him, and we do silly little skits
this fall.
Stage. Yeah, this fall. So look for that, and hopefully a comedy EP coming out soon. And Why We Love Star Wars, which is a celebration of the greatest saga ever told.
And you can pick that up wherever books are sold. For Ken Napzok, the whole gang here at Rotten Tomatoes, I'm Mark Ellis, reminding y'all to check out RottenTomatoes.com. That's your hub, everything from movies to TV, everything in between, including when we might get some more Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew. There's a lot of cool stuff coming your way in the galaxy far, far away. And if you think those movie announcements at Celebration didn't get me out of my chair and walking around the apartment a little bit, I'm really excited for all 3 movies that were announced. So tell us what you think about all these things in Star Wars and more right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're on YouTube, click that bell. It's going to give you a notification every time we got a new vid drop, and subscribe right here. I'm Mark Ellis saying, as a famous bumper sticker once did, this is the way.